Okay, so for everyone who is new here, first timers, hi, I'm Sanjuksha, and I'm here with Dharini.
Hi.
We both are organizers of Women in Robotics Boston. If you don't know what Women in Robotics is, it's a nonprofit organization founded by Andra Kay in Silicon Valley, and so we both just started a new chapter in Boston last year, and we are very happy to have this event with you. Also, if you want to be a part of our regular events, please sign up on uh, meetingplace.io. We'll post a link in the chat, and welcome once again. Today we have Kajal Gada with us. She's a graduate from University of Maryland. She's been working in robotics for over 3 years now. She's been working at Reality AI, Qualcomm, and BrainCorp. So she has a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge to share with you guys. So feel free to ask any of your questions in the chat. We'll address all of those. So just to introduce the format, we are going to start with the questions that we got when you guys registered. So all the questions came from the registration form. We are going to start with those. Then we are going to also address all the questions that you guys have today. Just post it in the chat. We will make sure we'll address all those at the end of the session. So today we are going to cover a bunch of topics. So starting with how to search for robotics companies, how to build your resume, the application process, technical round preps, and also one and only networking that I think we already started that. So any new participants, we are following this thing that you can post your LinkedIn profile link on the chat, and also make sure you can just see the previous persons, just go onto their profile, connect and network as much as you want. So I guess we can start. Oh, also, thanks to our Zoom sponsors, Vecna Robotics. So they had made it possible for us to be here today. So thank you a lot. And I guess we can start with the first topic, that is searching for companies. So these are the questions that we got from our audience before. So the first question is how to filter job profiles based on domains and experience level. Dharini, would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you, Sanjuksha. So, well, what I do in this case is I just like go on LinkedIn. That's the first thing. Like just search for robotics, and it really helps if you can filter based on your entry level and what location you prefer. But just like setting up a alert really helps. Something other hosting that I use is Indeed and AngelList that have really helped me currently as well. And the most important tool here is like recently Google search is really helpful. So what I do is just like robotics jobs in say Massachusetts and gives me all the job postings that are and that have been like posting profiles since like 3 or 4 months. It just gives you all of them. So that's like really helpful. And one more thing I want to add here is while you're searching for companies, it's really important to understand what people care about currently, like where the market is interested in, where it's going. So for that, I guess maybe like follow the robotics hashtag on LinkedIn and like talk to people, join groups like Women in Robotics, so that you can you can like talk to people about more recent developments and where the money is flowing right now. And yeah, like what else do you think, Kajal?
So I would actually like to, I'm so sorry, Kajal. I wanted to give you one opportunity to, before you answer this question, would you like to give a short introduction to our members apart from whatever I said? So
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Just a quick introduction about me, as Sanjuksha mentioned earlier. I'm a graduate from University of Maryland. So, if there are any Terps out there, go Terps. Other than that, I have worked in the industry for over 3 years, and within just 3 years, I've actually held three jobs because of different circumstances, such as being laid off, not liking where I'm working, and so on and so forth. My last job was at a robotics startup in San Diego, and I worked there for 2 years. And the way I found out about that job was simply by looking for robotics company on Google. And that is the tip I would also give for the question. And also, I'm going to do a shameless plug here about my YouTube channel. I'm also a YouTuber, and in my channel, I talk about job search, being having a great career, and also about robotics. So do check it out and subscribe if that is what you want. Now, the things that Dharani said are really important. You know, go on LinkedIn, go on AngelList. I found my first job through AngelList. It was not publicized anywhere else. It was all in AngelList. And the reason this works is because most robotics companies are startups, and AngelList is the perfect place if you're looking for startup companies. So when it comes to robotics, because it's such a growing field and it's not a generic field like looking for software engineer or looking for front end, back end software engineers, you cannot simply just search for robotics job and see if you can, find ones. You have to sort of do it in reverse. Find robotics companies and then look on their website to see if you can find jobs that work for you. Now, looking for robotics companies, again, because most of them are in startups, go to AngelList. It'll work better than LinkedIn. Second, follow these newsletters. So I don't know how many of y'all know about Robotics Worldwide Listserv. It's a great resource. It is worldwide, so most of the jobs that are there or even other related news is worldwide, and you might have to do a little bit of effort to find ones that are applicable for your current city or location or country. So yes, check out Robotics Worldwide Listserv. And then there's also another newsletter called Weekly Robotics. Check both of them out. So from there, you'll find out companies, then you can go and look into it. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is experience level. Even when you're looking for entry levels, don't restrict yourself to just look for entry levels. Also look for software engineers where they say 1 to 3 years of experience needed, because sometimes it's not a hard bound. And a lot of people who are writing the job profile, sometimes they may also not know what they're looking for, and the requirements can change. So let's say they are looking for senior software engineers, but if they can't find any, they might be okay with hiring one or two entry level people to sort of divide the workload and continue to look for a senior software engineer. So don't look at it as a hard bound. Always reach out, always apply. But yes, don't go and apply for something that is 5 to 6 years experience if you are a graduate. And the same goes for senior level. Let's say you have 2 to 3 years of experience and you look at a job that says 5 to 6 years of experience, go ahead and apply. There's no harm in doing so. And with that, back to that, Sanjuksha.
One more thing I'd like to add here, that's a good point that Kajal noted about newsletters. So for Massachusetts specifically, there's something called Mass Robotics, if people who aren't aware of that. It's not it's just a collaboration of like different startups and different companies in New England area, and they have their newsletter as well. And recently they actually posted startups who are looking for people to join them. So do check them out, and don't worry, we are a little lagging behind in sending links in the chat. So we'll definitely, like, whatever resources are being discussed in this event right now are going to be emailed to you in like, so look for that as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Dharini. So we move on to our next question. So what are some domains in robotics like controls, planning, vision, AI, or general robotic software having high demand for engineers currently? Kajal, would you like to start?
Sure. I would say in general, most of them have high demand. There isn't like one that requires more than the other because robotics is a growing field. Trust me, I've been in a startup. My partner has a startup at the moment in robotics, and they're looking for someone in each different role. So there isn't one that has much higher demand than the other because all of these problems are unsolved and someone needs to come in and solve them, which is another thing that within robotics you don't have to necessarily go super niche, especially if you're joining at the starting level. You can keep yourself to open to multiple options. So when I was applying, I actually used to have 3 resumes, one for path planning, one for computer vision, and one for perception, because I was open to all 3 of those. So there isn't anything as one having higher demand than the other.
Thank you, Kajal. So
Yeah. one little thing here as well. Well, a little bit of context. So I'm like I lost my job during the pandemic, and I'm currently looking for opportunities. So right now, I've always, I mean, I've like during my job search, I've found that there are a lot of computer vision profiles uh, than AI. That's just my experience. But I think that for an specifically for entry level candidates, that if you even have some experience in vision, you can like definitely get some robotic software, a general software role, or any entry level role, because there is a common platform among like all companies, except who does not have a robotic platform. Like most artificial intelligence companies do just work on algorithms and don't have a platform as such. But otherwise, whichever companies are in automation, they definitely like require sensor fusion and vision. So yeah.
So with that, moving on to our next subtopic, resume building. So once you have searched for companies, we need to
um
know. Oh,
Before that, we can like take some questions if like people have on like looking for companies as well.
I don't think. Let me check.
So if anyone has questions, just drop them in the chat and use
Yes.
hashtag question. So that way we can easily pick out those from all the other messages that are going on.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea actually.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
need
don't
like
be shy. Like this is the time you're getting three people's full concentration, focus. Feel free to ask and we'll do our best to answer them.
Yeah.
yeah, this event is specifically for you, so use us as a resource. And
It
it's a learning experience for us as well. We have a YouTuber among us to teach how to handle these things. So thank you, Kajal.
So it doesn't matter if we don't get your questions, like you don't get your questions at the point where we are discussing a topic, we'll definitely answer at the end. So don't worry if you have questions about that are not related to the current topic, you can still ask them in the chat. So moving on to resume building. First question is for Kajal actually. Should the resume be updated for every job profile?
Thank you for the question. Absolutely. Because the thing is, if you have a generic resume, so okay, firstly, most companies use ATS, which is application tracking system, wherein they take the whole stack of resumes that they have received and they filter it, or they have this job profile and they sort of match and see which one works best. So if you have a general resume, your chances of it going through reduce significantly. So make sure to tweak it based on the job profile. By now, I don't mean that every time you get a job profile, you have to go ahead and change everything. Here's like a really smart trick. At least that is what I used to do. I used to have this like really long resume with all the projects I have done in all the different roles. And for each project, I had like 5 to 6 bullet points, sometimes saying the same thing in different words and different sort of methods. And then I had 3 resumes for 3 different profiles that I was interested in: computer vision, path planning, and perception. And when I was applying to someone, I'd look at the profile and I'll just tweak it. When I say tweak it, spend 5 to 10 minutes to, change it based on that. And sometimes I used to not even have to like type it in. I'll just take one of those sentences from my long resume and put it in so that it works best for this particular job profile. And the other reason I'm saying this is to make sure you are getting what the company is looking for. So at my last company, it was through networking I found out that they really care about people who code in Python versus C++ because that's the language they use. In robotics, both C++ and Python are popular. But my last company had a bigger preference for Python. I tweaked my resume to show and highlight Python more than C++, even during my interview preparation. And I used all of those insights, and that helped me. So, do tweak it based on what the requirements are.
Yeah, I mean, I really understand what Kaja is saying here. I used to do like based on the job description on the website, you tweak your resume accordingly to make sure like they pick you.
Yeah. I have a little different experience here. I actually don't change for every job profile. I've just updated my resume like thrice now. Once where I was like after graduation and once right now. What I so this it can help when you have actually have a long resume where like, people like me who are still entry level, they you don't kind of then in that case I have a simple formula to like explain your projects, to squeeze out all your experience as much as possible, to showcase like everything that you have done. To describe any project, what I do is first and foremost using like action words every time in every sentence. Secondly, in each line and in each project I try to explain, number one, what software I use, what tools I used, what algorithms I used, and how many people were there in that project. Sometimes if you're describing a work experience, each sentence can be a different project, so like try to explain if you did that individually or like in a group of people, in a group. Secondly, your language is supposed to be in an accomplished based thing and not an action based, that it has to show that you didn't just do something that you are told to. I've seen a lot of resume where people say like implemented a star, but I mean, what am I supposed to, get out of that? How much of a star you do you know? Like, can you tweak a star and make a different algorithm out of it? Or what level of understanding do you have that? So using that example, what I would suggest to do is maybe write something like that. I implemented a star to compare, like use it as a baseline for this algorithm, or compare these like 5 algorithms and found out what, like that level of depth it should be there, and everything should have like a why. if you used if you implemented, like, why, I want to know why, like what did you get out of it? So yeah, this kind of accomplished based thing, and adding what language you use and how many team members and what algorithms every time in every single line, so you can squeeze as much as you can. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Dharini. So we actually have a related question to this app, resume building or applications. Basically, so advice for students writing cover letter as the part of their application. So anything to say about that?
This is something that I am like really I have strong opinion about. This is one question that I'm definitely gonna ask all the recruiters, that do you really read cover letters? It is as outdated as hell. And to be honest, I do have a common cover letter as well. I do change it for profile to profile, depending on my motivation to work for the company. That is all I change. I don't change my experience, because I'm, well, personally right now my application is a robotics generalist. So that's why, that is the reason why, if you are expert in different domains, you should definitely change. But yeah, yeah, and for cover letters, just try to add stuff that you cannot share in your resume, some experiences, some stories that you think that would be really interesting for people to talk, if anybody reads. um and again, so I've been on both the sides actually. I've taken, like, I've interviewed other people as well, and as a engineer, I wasn't even given to read a cover letter. So I'm not sure if recruiters or HR do read, use to filter, but I would try to find that out for you. Like I
I would personally encourage the habit of writing a cover letter. So it's like there are so many companies asking for it. So I'm not sure if they read it or not, but I definitely would say that write a cover letter. About what to write in a cover letter, just start with a small introduction, probably like a small story about how you got interested into the particular job, or but like a few lines about why you're interested in that particular company. That is like the different for it should be different for every company that you apply to. And other than that, a general, I would go like starting from what how you started in robotics to your projects, and then try to connect each section. Don't make like jumps from one part to the other. try to connect, like I started this project in the first year, which inspired me to go to the next project and so on. So just try to make sure that your cover letter sounds like an entire story and not like different, like don't jump on topics basically. So with that, we have the next question. How can I best represent my skills to facilitate a jump to a different robotic industry with current experience? So for instance, shifting from robotics arm to self-driving cars, or perhaps from mechanical to software. Kajal?
Sure. So, okay, now there are two aspects to this. Firstly, within robotics, the main thing that matters, at least on the software side, is can you code? And in general, for both software and hardware, can you solve problems? So, those are the two most important skills that are necessary. So, be it going from robotics arms to self driving car, essentially from manipulators to autonomous guided vehicles or autonomous or guided vehicles, the main thing remains the same. Can you write code? Can you implement algorithms? Can you solve the problem that exists? Essentially, do you have problem solving capabilities? So, firstly, whenever you're transferring, talk about those skills, showcase those skills. So, when you're talking about your work, right? So, for example, you worked in manipulators. Don't just talk about path planning in manipulators because that is completely different from self driving car. But I mean, yes, do mention it, but the focus should be on how you encountered a particular problem, such as dealing with inverse kinematics, and how you solved it. So you're showing that, hey, doesn't matter what has come up, I know how to solve it. That said, shifting from mechanical to software development, it is a lot of going from making CAD models and all of those other aspects which is in mechanical engineering to writing code which is much more in software engineering. So in those cases you do have to highlight or show you can do this other thing, and one of the best ways to do that is doing projects either in your current role. Try and speak with your manager or lead and see if you can get a little bit more work. Talk to them about how you want to branch out and you want to be more involved in the holistic process, and see if you can get a little bit more work of that type and you can add it on your resume. And if that doesn't work out, do like small personal projects and then add that, so you can show that even though you don't have expertise in that, you have expertise in this, where again you're showing bringing those problem solving communication skills, dealing with QA and all the other team members here, plus you've also started to learn how to code. So you are someone who can learn and pick up those skills and transition into this other role as well.
So we have a nice comment about the same topic that we were talking about, cover letters. Please make sure you read that. And I think moving on to the next topic. Thank you, Kajal, for this one. So application process after resume building. So what are the major skill sets recruiters and interviewers look for in our profiles? So
I think I sort of answered that. Coding skills,
and,
especially if you're on the software side, problem solving skills, super important. And here is one thing I would like to add, especially when you're applying for entry level positions. A lot of resumes talk about leadership positions in entry level positions. Yes, leadership is great, but when you're starting in your first at least 1 to 2 years, you're not going to be doing so much leadership as you're going to be working well with other teams. So the skill to highlight is how you work with other people in your team. So let's say if you have experience from the industry, then you can talk about how you worked with other members in your team, how you've collaborated with different teams. So for example, if you're on the development side, how you worked with R&D team, or let's say if you are in development team, again, how have you collaborated or worked with the QA team. And if you're a student, talk about your group projects, talk about how you've divided work, how you've communicated with one another. Trust me, for entry level, that matters way more than showcasing your leadership capabilities. Now if you're going for senior roles, then talk about how you've discussed ideas, brainstormed ideas, converted ideas into projects. Again, these are soft skills. When it comes to hard skills, do you know how to code? Do you know how to solve problems? Do you know how to implement algorithms? Do you have hands-on experience? That is what matters.
Yeah, I mean, like if you are a good programmer, you can land like any like a land a job anywhere in robotics. I mean, that's and it's not just like writing code. It's about understanding how it hits the hardware as well, and how you can best like optimize that in different languages, so that it and that comes with experience. So like keep at it, I think. Secondly, at just one more thing to add here, at entry level, I think under a very good understanding, a clear understanding of your own projects, of your own work is very important. One thing I do is like use that 5 why approach. If I'm preparing for an interview, I take up a project, and I start with one why, then like I keep on asking myself like why this algorithm, why this sensor, why this robot, like that till like 5 levels. And once you can answer that in a like a clear way, I think you're good to go.
Thank you, Dharani. I think that really helped me as well because I really like that idea. So I'm going to use it for the future. So moving on to the next question. Typically, how much time do companies take to respond to your application the very first time and each round of interview?
Yeah, I can take that. So this is my experience. It can be different for people. So when after you have applied, like the worst case scenario is like more than a month till I get a response from the company. It depends. It actually depends what month it is, what the company's hiring cycle is, what its general trend is. But yeah, the advice here is, if you haven't received a rejection, don't expect that it's done, that chapter is closed. You can definitely like receive a reply even after like way late. But typically on like average, I think 1 or 2 weeks. You should if it's a fit, they will definitely get back to you for the first phone screen. After the first call, expect the second call like within a week or so. They send you a technical challenge or another phone screen depending on their process. And lastly, once you are done with your panel interview, the final round, expect an offer like within days. I mean, if they like you, they'll definitely want to move faster. But this is not a general case. For usually larger companies, they have more candidates, so they take more time to reply. But in robotics, I think like majority startups, so it's usually quicker. And if you don't hear, then I mean, the chances are not zero, but definitely low. Yeah, I hope that answers.
I think I
Yeah,
would
I
like.
have something. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Kajal. Yeah.
Okay, I have something really fun to say. So I've had experience on both extremes. When after so for my second job, I had spoken with someone at a conference, and then they conducted my first interview at the conference itself. From that interview till the time I actually got my job application, the whole thing went on for about 10 weeks, like almost 2.5 months, which was crazy. And on the other hand, for my last job, I had applied, gotten a coding challenge within 2 days, and then I just didn't hear back. I don't know, it went, got lost into somebody's email or what, but I didn't get a response back. I reached out through my personal network, and things happened really fast. I spoke to them through my personal network on Monday. 2 days later, I did my interview, and 2 days later, I had the offer letter and I'd accepted it. So I've had both extremes. So
That's
things
crazy.
can go anywhere. Exactly, it's crazy. And the reason this happens so much in robotics industry is a lot of companies are startup or in a growing phase. So they don't always have the time to even interview. And it's, trust me, I have worked in startups, my partner has a startup. It's like they want to, but then they have 10 other fires that they need to put out to, that they can't always stay on top of these things. So the one advice that I literally give to everyone: make sure you keep following up. Like 1 week later, 2 week later, even if it is 1 month later, be shameless about it and follow up.
So I think what I do specifically is just ask in every interview what is the next step and how long it will take for you to come get back to me, and just be out there and ask them. Don't be shy or anything like, but just if you ask them, because every company is different, so we don't know if they have two more candidates or 50 more candidates. Everything can take time, so make sure you ask the interviewer itself. So moving on to the next topic, behavioral questions or phone screens, as you would like to call them. So this is question, how to identify what questions could be asked in a technical interview. So I guess this is, oh, okay. Since we started with this, so I do have myself like a cheat sheet kind of a thing, or more like a small notebook that I keep for myself, just respect to interviews. So I think you need to know, you have to be prepared when you are looking for jobs every time. Like anyone can call you anytime out of the blue. You don't know that it's going to be like, not all phone screens are scheduled. Sometimes they just call. So you have to be ready. So make sure you have all the answers ready handy. So about technical interviews, how to know what they, at least not know, but at least you can predict what the companies can ask you. First of all, research the company as much as you can know about them. Watch videos on their websites, read the job description very thoroughly, because that will give you out if it is a arms related robotics company, robotic arms. So you know whatever projects are you have related to robotic arms, they're going to ask you questions on that. So that is how, based on the job description and based on what the company does, you know what questions are coming your way. So you can be prepared in that way. And also, depending on the projects, they can go from the project internally. So as Dharini previously said, like if you have a motion planning project, they can ask you about A-star, or why did you use A-star? Why did you not use some other algorithm, RRT or something like that? So that is how you predict those. Anyone else have to add anything? Okay. Next question we have, how to answer, tell me something about yourself or walk me through your resume kind of questions. So whatever I'm gonna say right now, I'm also gonna make it a part of my cheat sheet that you guys would get in an email after a couple days after the session. So you start with what you're doing currently when you ask like walk me through your resume. So just you should know your resume by heart. That's what I think, first of all. So you should know, like, you start with the current position, what was your most recent education, then if let them know about if any internships that you did, and then again go until to your undergraduate at least. That is the education span you should tell them. Apart from that, go into what skill sets do you have. Make sure you let them know, as Kajal previously said, like if it's a company that is using Python, you should make sure that they know that you know Python, and so on. So other than that, you can also add some relevant hobbies if you have, like some people like to do online courses a lot. Since it's COVID, everyone is doing online courses, but in general, you can add hobbies like I like to do some personal projects or something like that, and then go into your actual projects. So my suggestion, you could just have like a small paragraph written to yourself. You can refer to any time when you have interviews.
One little thing here, this thing I do usually after I have like given a brief introduction to my background, I just like simply add what I'm looking for currently, and this gives me a jump ahead to their questions like why you want to join this company. So I just do that and kind of try to link it to my experience as well, to either some product they're working on or whatever service they provide. If you don't have, just maybe talk about a startup environment, maybe. Yeah, that's another little.
Oh, okay. So thank you, Dharini. Let's, I guess. Okay, so how do you explain technical projects? So So I think Dharini answered this question kind of with the 5 whys. So I would just like to add few more things to it. If it's a group project, make sure you tell them what you worked on and not the project is about. I have learned this with giving interviews because they don't want to know what happened in the project as much as they want to know what you did. So make sure you tell them what you did. Start with like, what was the purpose of the project? Did you do it for a course, for an internship or anything? Why did you do the project in the first place? Then what was the objective, the end goal? Then go through each part of your project, like how it's anything. It can be starting from hardware, you designed a robot, to the interface of software and hardware, everything. And make sure you focus on what you did. That is like in block letters, I would say. If you don't do that, they would think probably you don't know what you're working on actually, or you did not participate in the project as much as you have to. So that's about the projects, and details I would definitely add in the cheat sheet again. So don't worry about that part. All right. Okay, then we'll move on to the next topic, technical challenges and live coding. So first question, what kind of questions are asked in live coding and how to ace these interviews?
I can take that.
Okay.
So most of the live coding questions, they want to see how you are thinking. They are, I would say, easy to moderate level. You won't get really difficult questions because they still want to get to know you and your thinking process. So they know if they give you a really difficult question, you'll spend most of the time thinking about the solution itself. In terms of how to ace that interview, literally talk as you're solving that problem. I know it's really odd because when you're used to solving all those lead codes or hacker rank problems while preparing, you're only solving it on the computer and maybe a piece of paper, and you're just thinking inside your brain. And it's really odd, but you have to learn to speak your thoughts out loud. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to give the correct answer. You can completely give the wrong answer. So last Thursday, 2 Thursdays from now, I had Anto, the coding Yuri, come to my channel and talk about how to do well on interviews and how to answer these questions. And she gave this really great advice that even if you have the wrong answer, say that and then say that I don't think that is the right answer. So for example, let's say they give you a question on uh, sorting array, okay? And they're asking what's the best approach. You can literally start by saying, okay, I know of 3 sorting algorithms off the top of my head: merge sort, heap sort, this, that, and let me think about which one's best. So I know with merge sort, this is the pro and this is the con. And with this one, this is the pro and this is the con. And then you can literally say, right now, I think the best one is this. And then let's go ahead with that. And if I can think of reasons why it wouldn't work, we can revisit on how to do better. So then you can just pick one and go ahead with that, but literally say that out loud. Literally go ahead and say, off the top of my head, this is what I'm thinking, or this is where I'm at. I know this one is a limitation for this particular data structure or algorithm, but I can't think of anything better. So just talk out loud and talk about your assumptions and your problems. Even if while solving a code you are stuck, it's for example syntax, right? Sometimes you're so used to coding on a computer that you suddenly forget the syntax when you have to write it on a Google Doc or a whiteboard. It's okay, write what you can and then be like, hey, I really don't remember what the syntax for loop is. So for example, in Python, it's for x in range 5 or whatever, right? And you can be like, I know it's something like this, but I can't remember what it is. Can you help me out? No one's going to say like, oh, no, I won't help you out. In fact, the interviewer totally wants to help you, but they can't help you if they don't know what you're stuck at. Like if you keep staring at your whiteboard or your Google Doc and they can give you a hint, but that hint might not be where you're stuck. So then it's of no help to you versus, you say that, hey, I'm thinking of doing it like this, but I don't know if it's the right way or not. And they can give you some hints, or they can be like, okay, you know what, let's just go ahead with that and we'll see how, what kind of a result we get. Because they want to know how you think and how you solve problem. Again, problem solving, that is the main thing through and through.
I cannot agree more with Kajal about this. Like, keeping quiet in your live coding interviews is the worst thing ever, because they would never know what you're thinking. And that is how you fail an interview. Even if you don't give them the most efficient and the best code that you could write, you at least have to let them know what you're thinking. So keep talking. um, and going on to the next question about the same thing, like how to prepare for live coding interviews. What are some of the resources you would suggest for preparing for technical rounds?
So one special mention I want to do here is a YouTube channel that really helped me called The Cherno. He's an Australian guy, and he's perfect for learning C++. I'm like adding a link to his channel. Do check it out. And one more tip I find best is I'm always anxious about these like live coding interviews, and I find it difficult to keep on talking. One good thing helped me is to just change my attitude towards how I was taking these things. Just be confident on yourself and your ability to learn. It's fine if you don't know something. It's fine if you like as Kajal mentioned, if you forget a for loop. It's absolutely fine. Just say it. Just make sure that you present it in a most human way possible, because it's like I can't stress it out more that it's completely fine. Um, yeah, and just have confidence on your ability to learn, and how you are coming to that solution, and how you have always solved stuff that you have like stuck in the past. So keep in mind those things and try to be more like active. And I think that comes with more with practice. I've been less anxious now, but yeah, I hope it helps.
So I guess other resources we would say about coding, I think I used HackerRank myself. I'm also like aware that Leet Code is pretty good about all the coding questions. And as Kajal said previously, they're not going to give you some out of the world question for live coding at least. If you have like, if they have bigger questions, they would actually give you a coding assignment, like a take home assignment or some online coding test. So the best way is to practice. I mean, there is no shortcut to success. You have to practice as much as you can for codings. So that is how you prepare for mostly like live coding. So going on to the next question, what is the difference between whiteboard and live coding? So I would actually start with this question. Whiteboard is more about concepts that you know. Live coding tells you that it is a coding interview, but whiteboard doesn't always have to be a coding interview. It can be about your concepts. They can ask you questions about your projects to explain them. They can also ask you to write a small algorithm based on like a pseudocode, not actual code. So be prepared for that when they call it a whiteboard interview. So because that is like more wide range than live coding. So that's mostly about whiteboards. Anyone else, anything? All right.
I think you covered it right. It's a lot more about pseudocode and actual code.
Exactly. So now moving on to the most hot topic of the evening, networking. So I think we have got a lot of questions on networking, and people have showed very much interest, like how to network. So starting with
okay, so we're gonna. I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're gonna do a fun thing on the chat. If you are someone who cringes on doing networking, are like super conscious, give me an exclamation mark. I want to know what my audience is like.
I think Kajal, you're muted. We
Go ahead, Sanjuksha, with your question.
Oh, okay, yeah. I am just making a note of the questions from audience, so we can, after the networking questions, we are going to get to the questions.
just one little thing. I want to apologize here. We assumed that our audience was going to be shy tonight because that's what we have experienced. So we prepared a couple of questions ourselves, but yeah, we will try to get to all of your questions.
Yeah, I think we have a few in audience from like 5 questions or some. So the most networking question that we have first of all is how to go about finding referrals for companies. Uh, where you do not have like previous connections or like friends or anything, how to get referrals from such companies?
Okay, I'm taking this question first. So I love that the second part of the question is very clear, where you do not have previous connections. And it also goes to the fact that okay, so you have to understand, referrals is not just saying that, hey, interview this person. Referrals is saying interview this person because I believe they have the skills you're looking for. Because when you interview someone, even if you know you have a whole bunch of interviews and you're doing like 4 or 5 hours of interviewing, it's very difficult to know that is this person really good at the skills that they're claiming they're good at, which is why most people want referrals. So like as an employer, I would want to hire someone who can come in and do the job. And to do that, I need to know if this person can do it, because sometimes with interviews you can fake a lot of things. I hate to say it, but you can. And no one wants to hire someone that they have to, again reteach everything. And then in that whole time period when they're reteaching them, the work is still pending. And especially in a field like robotics where it's growing, and most startups don't even have resources to hire 10 people even if they want to, given the amount of work. And the same goes for, let's say, I mean, this is some things that I learned literally after being in the industry and hiring people. Let's say, and as an employer, someone does end up hiring a bad employee, or let's just say they're not bad employee, but they're not the fit for this particular role and they're fit for something else. Now you can't just let them go. You have to put them in performance appraisal. You have to give them a chance to learn and grow. And if that still doesn't happen, then you can lay off and get another person. This can go on for anything between 6 months to 1.5 years. Now that's a lot of time when someone still can't get the work done. This is why referrals exist. So when you're asking for referral, it is important that you know someone. Now, if you don't know someone and you still want a referral, use the networking tree. And by this, I mean, find out someone who knows that person and you know as well. Find those mutual connections. Even if it's 1 degree, 2 degree, 3 degree, and LinkedIn totally helps us with that, right? Like you look up someone from a particular company, or let's say, you want to go to XYZ company. Literally search that, find all the people, and then they will find, LinkedIn will show 2nd degree, 3rd degree connection. It'll show you how you're connected to them. Use all of those people to get to the other person. So, for example, like Sam here on our Zoom call, she doesn't know me, I don't know her, but she wants a reference. But we might have a common connection. So she goes to this common connection and be like, hey, I'm looking for this job. I want a referral. Can you vouch for my skills? And I also know this person. So this person comes to me like, hey, I've worked with Sam before. I know she's good for it. Please refer her. I will do it because I have someone who can vouch for it. So one is that trick. Second, ask for an opportunity to interview. Like I get this message all the time on LinkedIn where some random person will send me a message, can you refer me? That's it. Straight up, can you refer me? And my answer is no, because I don't know you. And you've not even found any common connections. But here's something else that can work. You can ask me that, hey, I know we don't know each other. I'm looking for to go for your current company or this X company that you worked for before, and I'm looking for a referral. Can we talk about it? I have this thing where I call it virtual coffee chat. Don't ask me to sit with you for 1 hour and talk to you. But if you say, hey, can we have a quick 15-minute coffee chat and let me build a case for a referral, I'd be open to that. And then we can talk about and I can get to know you. And if I see something, I'd be open to referral. And I can literally write in my referral to the company, right? That, hey, I've not worked with them before, but I had a quick conversation with them and I see that they have potential. So do that instead of a plain, can you refer me?
I totally agree with Kajal over here. That is like, we definitely don't want to hear like, can you just refer me out of nowhere? So yeah. definitely.
One little thing here, if sometimes you don't get a reply, don't take it personally, please, because a lot of the time people don't check their LinkedIn's. Maybe they are in a different state of mind, or they just like, don't open it. So it's completely fine. Just broaden your effort, like ping more people and keep pinging. I know it can be like really a headache, but that's about it. Like there's no other way. I don't know what.
Maybe I apologize in advance if we don't reply to you ever. So, moving on to the next question. This is a very interesting one. So, sorry. Oh, sorry.
Something that I'm going to interject about this networking thing. When I'm on things like this, I've gone to the Women in 3D Printing North American Happy Hour, and I know very little about 3D printing, but I went in and said, I'm new. I did robotics. I'm curious what's this organization about? And I always like wiggle my mouse, get all the names on the Zoom, and then I take a screenshot of it. So I have all your names for later, and I put that in the same folder with my notes if I take notes or save the chat or whatever. Anyway, I haven't looked for a job actively yet, so I can't say, oh, this works. But it is like, I just started going back to your LinkedIn's. I will put bookmarks and make a folder of those people and say, where did I know those from? Because I met probably 10 ladies through a Python course through AnitaB.org over the summer. Yeah, I'm like, I may never run into these ladies again, but it'll help me remember where I met them. Anyway, I didn't want to super interrupt, but I did want to throw that in when you're on networking.
This is a great, actually, this is a great idea. I mean, I totally agree. Like, you can have like a document to make sure you remember everyone. There's so many people you meet at different conferences, right? Yeah. So next question is a very interesting one. So this is about people who don't like social media much, and they think, so the question goes something like, how can a person adverse to social media overcome repulsions and use LinkedIn effectively? Especially, how can you network without feeling fake or like you're using other people? Do you
I
think?
absolutely love this question.
Yeah, even me too.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, right? Social media is completely designed for you to be addicted to it and continue to use it. There's that scroll feature that never ends. It has been researched and created. In fact, there's like a documentary where people who created the like button talk about what they intended and how it's being massively misused. And they kind of feel responsible for all of this that has happened. Having said that, there are a lot of things that you can do to change it for you. So for example, let's talk about Instagram, right? The most popular one right now. You can totally change what you see in your feed by following the type of people that are in the things that you are interested in, and by following hashtags. So right now, my Instagram feed, I absolutely love it because I'm following the people who create good content. And if it's, something that you don't like or it makes you feel repulsive, disconnect, unfollow them. So here's the thing, right? Like someone might have great intentions and they share an inspirational story, but if that doesn't inspire you and make you feel jealous, unfollow. Like same post can have different impact on other people, and there's nothing wrong with you looking at that post and feeling jealousy, but saying, okay, I know I feel jealous, so I'm just gonna remove that from my environment by unfollowing that people. And there's nothing, like, you're not saying, hey, hate you, like, why are you doing all this, you're making people jealous. No, I'm talking about simply unfollowing them, and there's nothing wrong with it. Like they can go inspire the people that do inspire them, but it doesn't work for you. I know Jill wanted to say something. Let me finish up and then we can give you an opportunity.
I was just waving to Japneet. No, she's
okay. Awesome.
Kajal, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Now comes the part about not feeling fake. Don't do things that you're not into and you won't feel fake. I know there's this whole thing where, people like to post about what they're eating, what they're listening to, this, that. If that doesn't feel like you or your personality, don't do it. I'm not saying you are the one who's responsible. I'm saying you can do steps and things to change how you interact with this thing. Like for example, there's this like, okay, on Instagram, if you try to log in, it's literally one click. Like, remember your password and you can click it and you're logged in. If you want to log out, there are literally 6 to 7 steps. And the reason I know this, I log out of Instagram every time. I do this on purpose. I will go on Instagram, and once I'm done, like the 5 minutes scrolling that we all do when we want to take a break, I will go and log out, even though it takes 6 steps. And that reminds me of how difficult it is. I choose to have my phone not remember my password. So I have to type in the password every time. I'm like consciously making it a little difficult for me to go on Instagram. And it's like a thing, right? Like we all can say, okay, just uninstall and don't do it. But the thing is, I enjoy it and I do want to do it. I just want to limit how much I do it. So I'm changing my environment. Like, I have to forcibly enter the password. I'm making it a little difficult to log in, and it works. Like sometimes I'll go and I'm like, okay, like it will hit you that, oh, I logged out for a reason. Maybe I'll do it, after, like, next time I'm opening it. But right now I'll skip it.
So,
Now the last part of the question.
yeah,
Sorry,
Go
sorry,
ahead. Go
Kajal,
ahead.
we just a little short of time, so I just wanted to make sure
Okay.
we get on with our audience questions. I'm so sorry.
Okay,
So,
I'm sorry about that. I'll do like a quick 1 minute on how to, like you're using people, the last part of the question,
yeah,
how to
no
get over you're using people. Networking is transaction, but it's not like business transaction, dollar for dollar, value for value. It is about, you giving someone something and them helping you out in ways you don't know. You're not using people. And if you really feel like you're using them, then think about how you can help them. Like, for example, a long while ago, I helped a student from my university get a job by talking to her for 30 minutes and, fixing all of her job application search process. Like a year or so later, out of nowhere, I get a request to be a speaker somewhere. And I'm like, hey, how'd you guys find me? Like, oh, this person referred you. Like they told us that, go check out Kajal. She's a great speaker. And I'm like, whoa. And this person helped me after years. So, don't use people. Like, in fact, see how you can help them, even if it's sometime later in the future. And with that, back to you.
So also like people think giving reference, it's like a favor that you get from other people. It's not. By the way, if I give a referral to my company, like for someone for you and you get hired, I also get a bonus amount from them as a reward for referring you, like giving them a good candidate. So do not feel like you're using people by taking their referrals. They are also getting rewarded from the company for referring you. So that happens all the time, and they obviously decide who they want to refer and who they don't want to. So make sure you make a good statement that why they should refer you, but do not feel shy about asking for referrals or feel obliged that, oh, I'm taking advantage of someone by asking them for references. So if we don't mind, we can extend a few more minutes for answering all our audience questions.
Yeah, Kajal, are you okay with extending for 10-15 minutes? Good.
Okay, so I'll go order-wise how I got the questions. The first question that we had, like, do you have any specific advice for international students with respect to looking for companies?
So well, robotics usually get our international graduates. So I think don't worry, you should be fine. And most of them, like robotics as a field, I've never heard a company who doesn't sponsor a visa. So like, yeah, Kajal, do you have anything to add there?
I would agree that most startups which are in private sector don't have a problem and they will sponsor you. They might have some rules, like they don't want to sponsor the person who comes in right away, because a lot of times people take the sponsorship and leave. So they might have some rules. The only place you will find trouble is if you go into things that are in the defense spectrum. So, make sure when you're researching the company, see what they're doing. If they're working in defense, there's a chance that they cannot hire you because they require citizens or green card because of the security clearance and all of that. So just small things to look out for.
Also, make sure, if you have questions about this, definitely ask in your first phone screen or HR interviews, because you don't want to waste their time and also waste your time.
Your own time. Yeah, be completely transparent there. Just like, if you want it, you want it. I mean, don't be shy about that.
So next question from the audience we have, what is expected for robotic software roles? Do they want industry experience in computer vision or research experience is enough?
I guess research is fine too, as long as you are able to translate your experience into what they are doing. So I mean, how I feel about it is that companies are not gonna sit and wait like for a long time for you to know about you. So even it's your responsibility to think about some insights of how your experience can help them, and how like basically trying to find link to your work and their work. You can definitely find connections if you think about it. So yeah.
Okay, so about, so next question. I'm just moving through fast so that we don't waste much time. Uh, I have heard that startups are pretty demanding with our requirements for people, and being a person with disabilities, this is a concern for me. So I have been avoiding applying for startups. Is this a misconception?
Yeah.
Okay, I can try that question. I'll be honest, many times people are not aware of all the things that they should be doing.
Mm.
Starting a company is not easy. And when I say startup, I'm talking about the ones that are in the initial phase, literally 6 months into it. There are tens and thousands of things to do, including filing, putting up taxes and stuff. You'd think you'd have to pay taxes when you make money, but even if you don't make money, you have to pay taxes just because you incorporated a company. Making sure to, even things like setting up a website can sometimes be a huge pain in the neck. So companies aren't trying to exclude you. Sometimes and this is completely not fair. I agree with you that, they should be more aware, but sometimes they just aren't. Or, even if they are, it is not the first thing on the top of their head because they have literally thousands of things to take care of. Having said that, you should always approach them with solutions, or talk about, hey, I am so and so skills, and I want to do this. People are willing to accommodate you, trust me.
Yeah.
It's not like they, like I said, they don't think about it because either they've not experienced it, or they live under a rock and they just don't know about it. But if you tell them, they will make changes, they will accommodate you. On top of that, we are in a global pandemic which has actually helped your cause, because a lot of things, you can do work from home. So they no longer, it's no longer a limiting factor for you, because you are okay. Actually, I'm not in that, I don't have a disability, so I don't know best, but I'm guessing at your own home you would have a lot of tools that you might not find at a company. But go ahead and provide them solutions. I personally, so like I said, my partner has his own startup. I'm always giving him feedback that, hey, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this, so that you are more welcoming to everyone. So go ahead and share that with people so that they can accommodate you.
A couple of things to add here. I do have a disability, and I completely agree with Kajal. So sometimes people do not realize that what they need to do. So just go to talk to your HR and tell them that what you'll need. Talk to your supervisor to make sure that what things you need. Some companies do have committees to help to even think beforehand, but some companies don't, so it's fine. People are learning, these discussions are like ongoing. And secondly, on ours, it's not a misconception. Like in startups, like it's an unsaid thing, you are required to work more. And but you can save yourself from that by doing this little trick that during an interview, just ask them, not an HR interview, but people like with engineers, just ask them this question, that how do they accommodate if there is any query from the client or any last moment issue or problem that comes up, how are they handling it? This kind of gives you an insight on their planning process. Some people do estimate beforehand that this is gonna take this much time, so people don't work more than 40 hours a week, but sometimes people don't. So just however they answer is gonna tell you what the culture is and how, if you should be aware or not. So this also gives you an idea of whether you should be going with that company or not. So yeah.
Yeah, and the last thing I'd like to add, find mentors. find people who are exactly in a situation like you and ask them, hey, I'm in trouble. I ran across this problem. What do I do? I have had mentors who've helped me through the trickiest of situations by sometimes literally telling me, write this in your email and send it.
Yeah, and Women in Robotics is a good place. So please, like, use members and use us to like do that. Feel free.
We just have a few more questions. If so, how valuable is grad degree in robotics? Is there a better? Is it better to spend time working full time on a personal project, or go back to school for 2 to 4 years?
Okay, I'll take that. So I did write it in the chat. I don't know if I put it as everyone or I ended up sending it to someone specific. Personal projects matter way more than just a certificate or a degree that you've done XYZ course, because you can show practical skills. So like, let me give you an example. Even doing something as simple as a wall following robot, be it on an actual robot or in simulations such as ROS, Gazebo, or VBots, you will learn so many things, like the basic of, compatibility issues or sensor noise, how to, sometimes deal with corner cases, how to make things work. That if you can say that, or you can show that in your resume, you will get the job, because people know who have worked in the industry how difficult it is to implement things. So, show that you can convert algorithms into real world applications. Having said that, if you do decide to go for a degree or a course, make sure they have lots of projects, not just theoretical assignments, actual projects. That will make a lot of difference. And I've also known people who literally, either they were working in an industry or, were in a completely different field, started building their own robot, like with Arduino, Raspberry Pi, and so on and so forth, and brought that to their interview and got the job because they were able to show that, hey, I can do this.
So with this, we are going to the last question of the day. I'm sorry if we haven't already answered. I will make sure we answer it in the email. So does the experience in different topics like SLAM, ROS, Sensor Fusion hurt my resume, or like a 2-page resume basically hurt?
So
or is it a good
I
idea?
do have a 2-page resume, but I still would suggest that everything important should be in the first page, and the second page should be like some certifications or maybe some additional projects you have, or maybe like move your hobbies to that one. And yeah.
I think about this question, like if you have, even if you have a 2-page resume, you have to edit it according to the job description. If the job is asking for computer vision and you're talking about ROS, I don't think they'll be very happy about it. So just make sure that you highlight your skills that are suitable to the job description, and don't just put everything in your resume that you have, because you should obviously have a customized resume. Kajal, do you have?
So the one thing I would say is, let's say you know 10 things. Here's how I have like these 2 sections in my resume. The first one that I put it on top is literally called top skills. And that in there, I write things that I'm really good at. For example, because I've worked at my last company for 2 years and I've worked mostly with Python. Python is my top skills. And then at the end of the resume, I have other skills and competencies. There, everything else goes. So C++ might go there and Python will go on top if you're an expert on Python. The same goes with, ROS, Gazebo, VBots. There are tens of things. If there's one thing that you're really, really good at, put that on the top, and the top one should literally have 3 or 4 skills. That's it. Everything else goes into other competencies. And again, as Sanjuksha said, you can change it, based on the company that you're applying for. Your top skills should be the ones that company cares about, and everything else in the other competency. And for the 2-page resume, I have a little bit of differing opinion from these two. I don't think you should write a 2-page resume unless you are applying for an extremely niche position or for an extremely high position such as VP or C-suite. Reason being, even for a small company, for a position that someone put out for just 1 week, you can easily get thousands of resumes. That is how much high the demand is. Everyone doesn't look through all of those pages. So nobody is really going to look at the second page. And as Dharani said that, you should have all of the best things on the first half or on the top of your resume. Having a 2-page resume kind of makes you look like you don't know what is important, and you're not able to sort that out. It also makes you look like a person who can't communicate effectively, because you need like 2 pages to talk about things. Like if you've had only 1 to 3 years of experience, then you writing it on a 2 page is like, okay, you're elaborating or talking about things that may not be the most critical or important to the ones you're applying for. Let's say you have 5 to 6 years of experience, maybe that is in 2 different companies. Your first company, the like you worked for, let's say, three years for both of those companies. The last company that you worked for, that is going to have way more impact than the first company, because that is something you did literally 3 years ago and you might not even remember everything, versus this 3 years is your current experience and has way more value. So this is where you expand, and the other one is where you kind of bring it down. So you're still saying that, hey, I have 6 years of experience, and this is the 3 years worth of experience, which is the most, on top of my head. So those are my opinions. And before we sign off and before she says her last word, the only thing I would say is make sure to follow my channel, but also reach out on LinkedIn if we didn't get to your questions. Make sure to add a note and ask your question, or just throw them on my YouTube channel comments. I do my best to answer them, and LinkedIn is where I hang out the most.
Thank you, Kajal. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
one last note from me as well. I would, yeah, I mean, we did quite miss some of the questions, so I'm free to look out at your resume, Sam, and just like connect with me on LinkedIn, and I can like help having a one-on-one call as well. I don't mind going through whatever questions you have. If you just wanna maybe just discuss about robotics or whatever, just like reach out to me. Yeah, and best of luck.
Uh, so thank you, Dharinya sir. So finally, we just want everyone to know whatever we said here are our personal opinions. It's no rule book, or that is not how exactly everything happens. So this is just based on our personal experiences. We just wanted everyone to take advantage of that. And once again, thank you so much for our Zoom sponsor, Specna Robotics. You made it happen here. So thanks a lot. And thank you everyone for joining us and also exceeding with us with the time limit. So thank you so much. Hope we have shared whatever you would like to. So have a great night.